In this lesson, we're going to talk about numbers and the different classifications of numbers. Okay, so the biggest classifications of numbers is a set of real numbers. And real numbers consists the set of rational numbers and the set of irrational numbers. Okay, so you might say, well, aren't all numbers real? Well, actually, no, there are some numbers that are what we consider um, imaginary numbers, and we'll talk. You'll learn about those in high school and when you get into algebra 2 and stuff. So, but right now, the biggest set that you need to worry about is a set of real numbers, and real numbers consists of rational numbers, okay, and irrational numbers. Rational numbers are any number that can be written as a fraction, and if you write them as a decimal, they're either going to end or they're going to repeat themselves. Okay, irrational numbers can only be written can irrational numbers are numbers that can only be written as decimals that do not repeat or end. So one of the biggest example and most well-known example of that is the number pi. Okay, pi is an irrational number. It never ends and it never repeats. But in general, if a whole number is not a perfect square, then its square root is an irrational number. So if you're talking about the square root of 2, square root of 2 is an irrational number. And sometimes you can tell tell this, but sometimes you can't, because if you have a repeating decimal, okay, back here for rational numbers, okay, a repeating decimal might not appear to repeat on a calculator because calculators usually only show a limited number of digits. Like the most digits that most calculators will show is like eight eight digits, okay, or maybe 10. All right, so pause the video and copy these notes into your notebook. Also, go ahead and copy this little drawing or whatever into your notebook as well. Okay, this is just a graphical example or another way of looking at how the different numbers are um, are classified. And we'll talk about it more. We talked a little bit just previously about rational and irrational. Okay, but rational numbers can be further broken down into integers. Okay, so integers are positive and negative whole numbers. Whole numbers are numbers that are not normally written as fractions, but they can be. Okay, but whole numbers, only difference between whole numbers and natural numbers are that whole numbers include the number 0. Natural numbers are also called counting numbers. Okay, which if you count something, you don't start off with 0. You start off with 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, so copy this little table into, or this little drawing into your notebook. Right, this these little notes here. Integers are positive and negative whole numbers. Whole numbers are numbers that are greater than or equal to 0 without a fraction part of them. Okay, so they're normally, those would be, you know, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and integers are positive and negative whole numbers. Okay, and then natural numbers are the counting numbers. They're all the whole numbers except for 0. Okay, so integers would be, say, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and so on that way, and so on this way. Okay, so copy these definitions into your notebook. All right, so it says identify all the classifications that -35.9 belongs to. Well, this is written as a this is written um, as a decimal that ends. So this is a rational number. and that would um, that would be basically it's also a real number. Okay, so it's a real number. It's a real number and it's a rational number. All right, it is not an integer because it's not a whole number. Okay, and once you find classification it doesn't belong to, then you can stop because it doesn't belong to any smaller ones. All right, square root of 9. Well, if you take the square root of 9, square root of 9 is 3. So that's a real number. Okay, it's a rational number. It's an integer. It's a whole number, and it is a counting number or a natural number. So this includes all of the different classifications. All right. Square root of 5. Well, 5 is not a perfect square, so this is just simply an irrational. It's just simply an irrational number. All right. 2/5. 2/5 is a fraction. Okay. Well, can a fraction? Okay, so it can be written as a fraction, and does it? If you write it as a decimal, 2 divided by 5 is 0.4. Okay, so this is a real number. Okay, it's a rational number because obviously it can be written as a decimal or that terminates, or it can be written as a fraction. And is it an integer? No, it's not an integer because it does not. It's just a fraction. It's not a whole number. Okay, it's not a positive or negative whole number. So it's a real, or and it's a rational. Okay, identify all the places that 0.76 repeating belongs to. Well, remember, if it repeats, that's what this little line above here means. That 6 repeats. That means that it's rational. Okay, so once again, it's a real number and it's a rational number. Okay, and that would be all because it's not a whole number. Okay, is square root of 21 a rational number, irrational number, or not a real number? Well, it is a real number, but it's a irrational number. Okay, it's an irrational number because the 21 is not a perfect square. 0 over 3. Okay, 0 divided by 3. 0 divided by 3 is simply 0. Okay, so 0 is a rational number. Okay, it's a rational number. Not only is it a rational number, but it would also be a an integer. Okay, it's also an integer, and it is a whole number. Okay, because remember whole numbers are numbers including 0. Okay, square root of -4. Now, square root of -4 is not a real number. Okay, it's not a real number because there is no root that when multiplied by itself gives you a negative number. So if you take the square root of a negative number, it's always going to be not a real number. All right? Square root of 4/9. Well, if I take that, okay, so if I say 4 divided by 9 is equal to that, and take the square root, and I end up with 0.666667, and you can see here that it repeats, and it repeats itself, and then here at the end it's rounded up, so it is a rational number. All right, is 9 divided by 0? Well, we know that we can never divide anything by 0, So that would be not a real number. Okay? And square root of 24, I'm sorry, it's square root of 23. 23 is not a perfect square, so it's an irrational number. Okay, so those are some examples of rational and irrational numbers and the different classifications of numbers. So make sure you have all that stuff written down in your notebook that you can refer back to. And if you have any questions, make sure you ask. And we'll talk to y'all later.